Welcome to Monday Morning Quarterback, a weekly feature from Cannon Church in Snellville, Georgia. I'm Tim Emmett, the senior pastor at Cannon, and on Monday mornings, we connect the message from Sunday, the Christian faith, and the week ahead. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 4. The 1982 Washington Redskins, winners of Super Bowl 17, were, in their own words, a team of rejects. Their roster was filled with players that no one else wanted, beginning with their quarterback, Joe Theismann. Theismann had been in the league for 10 years, but he'd never won anything, never been to the playoffs. He still wore a single bar across his helmet, looked like a kicker. His own coach was trying to replace him. Their running back, John Riggins, was a good player, but he had bounced around the league. He'd been in the league for, I think, 11 years. He was 33 years old, which is getting up there for running backs. During the season, the 82 season, he just barely managed to average 3 yards per carry, which, as you may know, is not very good. That's not at all impressive. Their offensive line had 3 players on it, 3 starters on it, who had been cut by other teams. Their wide receivers were so short that they were nicknamed the Smurfs. Their head coach, Joe Gibbs, was in his second season as head coach, and in his first season, he had lost his first 5 games. Everywhere they turned, the 82 Redskins looked like unlikely champions. They were, as I mentioned, a team of rejects filled with players that no one else wanted. But they believed in each other. They believed in their coaches, and that faith gave them hope. They managed to make it into the playoffs. They actually had the best record in the NFL that season. It was a season shortened by a strike in the middle of the year, so they only played 9 games. They had an 8-1 record, which sounds impressive, but they won 5 of those games by just a few points. They were bailed out. Those games were won by their kicker, Mark Mosley, who was himself a throwback player. He was a straight-ahead kicker in a league that was now dominated by soccer-style kickers. Mosley was actually the team MVP. They were a team of rejects, of unlikely stars, led by a still new coach. They made it into the playoffs, but no one picked them to win the Super Bowl. However, they believed in each other. They believed in their coaches. That faith gave them hope, and they won that championship. They won the Lombardi Trophy. You know, on Sunday at Cannon, we continued our current sermon series, Please Don't Be My Neighbor. It's a series on loving our neighbors, on the second great commandment. And we talked about the fact that we face obstacles when it comes to pursuing our ring, our trophy, which is love. It's easy to say love your neighbor, but actually loving our actual neighbors, that is another matter. We faced all kinds of obstacles. For some of us, our religion may actually be our obstacle. It might make it hard for us to love our neighbors. Some of us are raised in a faith, or perhaps are being impacted by a faith that does not so much send us to the world in love as really call us to withdraw from the world in wariness and fear. We are, in reality, following the Pharisees, not Jesus. For still others, it's simple busyness. We are simply too busy to take the time to help a neighbor in need. Or perhaps, and this was the focus for Sunday, it is fear that gets in our way, fear that's the biggest obstacle for us when it comes to love. We live in a culture of fear with all kinds of people who want our money and our vote, who are cultivating fear, teaching us, telling us constantly that we should be wary of our neighbors, especially the neighbors who aren't like us. You can't trust them. And so we're encouraged to live from our fears. But over and over again in the Bible, God says, and God says to his people, Jesus says to his followers, do not fear, do not be afraid, don't live from your fears, don't dwell in fear. Peter, follower of Jesus, apostle of Jesus, says, do not fear, do not be intimidated. Set apart Christ as Lord in your hearts. In other words, live from your faith in Christ, your faith in Jesus, crucified, risen, reigning, Lord over all. Live from your fear in Jesus, your faith in Jesus, not your fear of the world. It's one thing to say love your neighbor, quite another to actually go and love your actual neighbors who may not be at all like you. But the scriptures encourage us, Jesus calls us not to dwell in our fears, but to dwell in his love, not to live from our fears, but to live from our love. There are lots of reasons to be wary. And the world can be a dangerous place, but if we set apart Christ as Lord in our hearts, if we trust that the crucified, risen, reigning Lord is with us, leading us, then we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be intimidated. Instead, we can walk in faith, hope, and love. So what's the game plan for this week? Set apart Christ in your hearts as Lord. At the beginning of the day, just remember there are reasons to be wary. There are many things to fear. But if we believe in Jesus, if we're following Jesus, then we can do as Peter says, don't fear, don't be intimidated. Set apart Christ as your Lord. Live from your faith. That will empower you to walk in hope and to live in love. That's a game plan for this week. I hope you have a great week.